The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the Vrais Empire broadcast the execution of the human ambassador. They expected Earth to weep. They expected our fleets to launch in blind, chaotic rage. They didn't realize that while they were busy preparing a show, humanity had already rewritten the script. The twin suns of Rexus Prime beat down relentlessly on the grand amphitheater, casting harsh, angular shadows across the obsidian and crystalline architecture of the alien capital. Over 3 million citizens of the Vrais Empire packed the tiered seating, their collective roar forming a deafening wall of sound that reverberated through the chests of the condemned. High above, thousands of hovering camera drones buzzed like mechanical locusts, broadcasting a live, unencrypted feed to every civilized star system in the Orion Spur. This was not merely an execution. It was a theatrical demonstration of absolute power. In the center of the massive arena, kneeling on a raised dais of scorched metal, was Ambassador Jonathan Hayes. He was 62 years old, a seasoned diplomat who had navigated the Jovian resource wars and orchestrated the first fragile peace treaties of the Sol system. His tailored charcoal suit, a symbol of Terran formality, hung in tatters. His face was severely bruised, and his left eye was swollen shut from days of enhanced interrogation. Yet despite his battered physical state, Hayes knelt with his spine straight and his chin raised defiantly toward the colossal figure looming over him. Grand Arbiter Zoker, the military and spiritual leader of the Vrais, stood 9 feet tall, clad in ceremonial armor that pulsed with a violent inner light. Zoker's 4 crimson eyes stared down at the human with a mixture of contempt and bored amusement. "Look upon your protector, children of Earth." Zoker's voice boomed, artificially amplified to reach both the arena and the trillions watching across the galaxy. The Arbiter's words dripped with arrogant certainty. For generations, the Vrais Empire has brought order to the chaotic void. We have crushed rebellions. We have broken empires that spanned 100 worlds. And yet this infant species, huddled around a single dim yellow star, dares to defy our tithes. You mistake our tolerance for weakness. Hayes coughed, a wet, heavy sound escaping his lips. He spat a wad of bloody saliva onto the pristine obsidian floor, mere inches from Zoker's armored boot. The crowd gasped. Zoker's mandibles flared in sudden anger. "You die today, Ambassador Hayes. Not as a martyr, but as an example." Zoker hissed, drawing a long, jagged plasma blade crackling with energy from his hip. "When your blood stains this altar, your leaders will break. Your fleets will launch in a desperate, uncoordinated frenzy, and my armadas, waiting at the edge of your sector, will reduce them to ash." He lowered the glowing weapon slightly. "Any last words, human? Beg for the mercy of the Empire." Hayes slowly shifted his gaze away from Zoker and turned his battered face toward the nearest camera drone. He didn't look at the alien executioner. He looked through the lens across the vast emptiness of space, straight back to Earth. He knew exactly who was watching. A grim, blood-stained smile appeared on his face. "Hold the line," Hayes said, his voice surprisingly steady. Then he turned his head back toward the towering Arbiter. "And check your chronometers, Zoker. You're already late." Zoker snarled and raised the plasma blade high above his head. "Ignorant meat." The blade fell. The searing heat of the plasma instantly vaporized flesh and bone. Ambassador Jonathan Hayes collapsed to the floor, lifeless. The crowd erupted into a frenzy of bloodlust and triumph. The camera drones zoomed in on the fallen human, lingering on the gruesome spectacle to ensure the galaxy understood the price of defiance. 40 light-years away, deep within the subterranean granite fortress of the Cheyenne Mountain Complex in Colorado, a room filled with the most powerful people on Earth watched the broadcast in absolute, suffocating silence. The massive digital screen dominating the Strategic Command Center illuminated the grim faces of analysts, generals, and technicians. No one wept. No one screamed. Fleet Admiral Evelyn Cross stood at the head of the central command table, her hands clasped tightly behind her back. Her sharp features remained completely unreadable, though her knuckles had turned white from the strain. Beside her, General Benjamin Walker slowly exhaled, his jaw locked tight. "Confirm biometrics," Admiral Cross ordered, her voice cutting through the heavy silence like a scalpel. A few feet away, Director of Intelligence Samuel Reed leaned over his console, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. Heart rate 0. Neural activity terminated. The Vrais medical scanners have officially logged him as deceased. He paused briefly. "Ma'am, the ambassador is dead." Cross didn't blink. She simply stared at the frozen image of her oldest friend lying on the alien dais. Phase 1 complete. Her voice softened almost imperceptibly. "Godspeed, Jonathan." Then she squared her shoulders. The brief moment of vulnerability vanished, replaced by the cold, calculating steel of a wartime commander. "General Walker, status of the Vrais border fleets." "They are holding position at the edge of the Cyrus sector, just as predicted," Walker replied, bringing up a tactical overlay on the main display. Red icons swarmed the edge of human-controlled space. "Shields up, weapons hot. They're baiting us. They expect our carrier groups to drop out of hyperspace in a revenge strike within the hour." "Let them wait," Cross said coldly. She turned her steely gaze toward the Director of Intelligence. "Director Reed, is the package active?" Reed looked up from his monitors, a dark, predatory gleam in his eyes. The dead man's switch triggered the moment his heart stopped. A faint smile crossed his face. "The Vrais network took the bait. The upload has commenced." To understand the calmness inside Cheyenne Mountain, one had to understand Operation Gordian. When the Vrais Empire summoned a human ambassador to their homeworld 3 weeks earlier, Earth's leadership already knew it was a trap. The Vrais had been escalating tensions for over a year, boarding Terran cargo haulers, annexing border colonies, and demanding exorbitant resource tithes. They wanted war, but their twisted code of honor required a pretext. They wanted Earth to throw the first punch. Terran High Command knew that launching a frontal assault against the Vrais Armada would be suicide. The aliens possessed shielding technology centuries beyond Earth's capabilities. Their central tactical network, the Core Mind, could calculate and counter human fleet maneuvers faster than any human tactician could issue an order. Humanity couldn't outgun them, so humanity decided to outsmart them. Jonathan Hayes had volunteered. He had sat inside Cheyenne Mountain and listened to the brilliant, almost insane plan proposed by Terran intelligence. The Vrais were an apex predator species, immensely arrogant and completely dependent on their vast hypernet, which controlled their ships, planetary defenses, and medical systems. Their external firewalls were virtually impenetrable. However, their internal systems, the ones responsible for processing biological data and city infrastructure, were inherently trusted by the network. Humanity didn't need to break through the walls. They simply needed a Trojan horse. Hayes' body underwent agonizing, highly classified genetic procedures. His bloodstream was infused with trillions of synthetic nanite data packets that remained completely dormant while he was alive. The activation trigger wasn't a timer. It wasn't a remote signal. It was a biological dead man's switch. The instant electrical activity in his heart stopped. The nanites awakened. As expected, the Vrais medical scanners immediately examined his body to confirm his death for the Galactic registry. Without realizing it, their own medical AI downloaded the microscopic data packets directly from Hayes' bloodstream into the central mainframe. Back on Vrais Prime, far beneath the cheering amphitheater, the real response was already underway. Xylos, the alien capital, sprawled across massive geothermal vents. Deep within the suffocating, sulfur-filled undercity, completely ignored by the billions celebrating above, Captain Liam Foster crouched in the shadows beside a massive coolant pipe. He wiped sweat from his forehead, his eyes fixed on the cracked datapad strapped to his forearm. Only moments earlier, he had watched Ambassador Hayes, a man he deeply respected, be murdered before the entire galaxy. A hard lump formed in his throat. He swallowed it. Grief could wait. Mission failure could not. He and his Black Ops unit, Orbital Drop Shock Team Wraith, hadn't arrived aboard a warship. Over the past month, they had been smuggled onto Vrais Prime piece by piece inside radiation-shielded cargo pods disguised as reactor coolant aboard Hayes' diplomatic frigate. While the Vrais focused on torturing the ambassador, Foster's team quietly disappeared into the depths of the city. "Rivas," Foster whispered through his subvocal communicator. "Status on the payload?" 10 meters away, suspended upside down by a repulsor harness above a glowing fiber-optic trunk line, Tech Sergeant Rivas worked furiously on a custom-built splicing deck. "The ambassador's pulse just flatlined, Cap," Rivas replied, his voice trembling slightly. The Vrais medical scanners uploaded his autopsy data into their central medical mainframe. Foster remained perfectly still. "Did the payload survive the plasma strike?" "Enough of it did," Rivas answered. He wiped grease from his visor before continuing. "The nanites are already replicating inside their systems. The virus is spreading through the firewall. The network thinks it's ordinary Terran biometric data. It's bypassing every external security protocol." Foster nodded once before turning toward another member of his team. Miller, the heavy weapons specialist, was kneeling beside the city's primary planetary shield generator, securing sleek black quantum charges against the enormous power housing. "Are the charges set?" Miller locked the final magnetic clamp into place before standing. "Phase 2 is fully armed, Captain. The quantum destabilizers are primed. We're only waiting for the virus to finish its work." The Vrais believed the war would be fought in the cold vacuum of space. Ship against ship, fleet against fleet. Humanity had chosen an entirely different battlefield. They were fighting the war in the enemy's basement. Far above them, the celebration reached its peak. Brilliant fireworks of colored plasma exploded across the twilight sky. Military parades marched proudly through the obsidian streets. Then, the Gordian virus activated. At first, the changes seemed insignificant. Traffic control grids flickered. Automated defense turrets unexpectedly entered diagnostic mode. Communication arrays briefly rebooted without explanation. But in orbit, the consequences were catastrophic. The enormous Vrais border fleets waiting patiently to ambush the Terran response suddenly suffered a complete communications blackout. Targeting systems glitched. Navigation sensors displayed endless loops of empty space. The core mind, infected by chaotic Terran algorithms, desperately attempted to repair thousands of phantom system failures simultaneously. Inside Cheyenne Mountain, the tactical holographic table suddenly flooded with new information. "Admiral," Reed called out. His hands raced across the interface. "We've confirmed a 12% drop in Vrais grid efficiency across their core worlds. The Gordian virus is cascading through the hypernet. Their deep space telemetry is compromised." A brief pause. "They're blind." Admiral Cross stepped closer to the holographic display. The perfectly organized Vrais fleet formations had begun breaking apart into isolated pockets of confusion. "They wanted a show," Cross said quietly. Her voice had become cold enough to freeze steel. "Let's give them the grand finale." She looked toward General Walker. "It is time to show them what happens when someone mistakes human patience for human weakness." Walker allowed himself the faintest smile. He unlocked a red security panel, turned a physical key, pressed his thumb against the biometric scanner. Execution confirmed. The silent arsenal is now active. Far out in the freezing darkness of the Kuiper Belt, beyond the orbit of Pluto, the true Terran fleet finally revealed itself. They were not massive cruisers. They were not flashy carriers. They were thousands of stealth-coated tungsten carbide kinetic penetrators. Interstellar rods from God. They carried no warp drives, no life support systems, no crews. For the past 6 months, while Earth pretended to be weak and continued diplomatic negotiations, these massive projectiles had been silently accelerating through carefully calculated gravity slingshots around the gas giants. Afterward, they simply coasted through the void in complete silence, perfectly timed to arrive on this exact day. The Vrais deep space scanners never detected them. The aliens were searching for enormous thermal signatures created by warp engines. They never considered the possibility of cold, lifeless metal traveling at a fraction of the speed of light. Back inside the undercity of Xylos, Captain Foster watched the lights of the alien capital begin to flicker violently. The virus had crippled the planetary shield software. "Shields are down to 10% and still dropping," Cap. Vrais shouted over the comms, no longer bothering to whisper as emergency sirens echoed throughout the underground complex. Foster never hesitated. Blow it. Miller slammed his fist onto the detonator. A silent quantum shockwave rippled outward, shattering the physical housings of the planetary shield generators. Above the surface, the shimmering golden dome that had protected the Vrais capital for more than 1,000 years flickered, cracked like shattered glass, then vanished completely. The trap had been sprung. The Vrais Empire, blinded by arrogance, had unknowingly handed humanity the keys to its own destruction. And they had done it live before the entire galaxy. Inside the amphitheater, the celebration instantly dissolved into confusion. Grand Arbiter Zoker stood motionless over the body of Ambassador Hayes, his 4 crimson eyes narrowing in disbelief. The magnificent planetary shield, gone. For the first time in generations, the capital stood completely exposed. A heavy silence settled over the millions gathered in the arena. Their triumphant cheers vanished, replaced by fear. The artificial daylight flickered once, then died. Darkness spread across the massive structure. The hovering broadcast drones began sparking uncontrollably. One after another, they dropped from the sky. A drone smashed into the obsidian steps only a few meters from Zoker, exploding into twisted metal. The Grand Arbiter roared at his personal guards. Report. None came. Every communication visor displayed nothing but endless streams of flashing error codes. Deep inside the towering citadel overlooking the arena, the core mind, the greatest artificial intelligence ever created by the Vrais, was dying. The Gordian virus, carried by microscopic nanites taken from Ambassador Hayes' bloodstream, spread exponentially through every connected system. It rewrote command protocols, disabled thermal regulators, corrupted navigation arrays, shut down planetary defenses, and blinded military command networks within seconds. Far below, Captain Liam Foster and Team Wraith sprinted through the darkness. The explosions from the destroyed shield generators had alerted the Undercity garrison. Move! Move! Foster shouted over the blaring alarms. Tech Sergeant Vrais and Heavy Weapons Specialist Miller ran close behind him, assault rifles raised as they scanned every corridor. The virus is fully integrated, Vrais called out between breaths while checking his wrist-mounted diagnostic display. Orbital cannons are offline. Planetary anti-air batteries are completely dead. For the first time since the mission had begun, Foster allowed himself a brief smile. The sky is ours. High above the atmosphere, the Vrais armada was tearing itself apart. The virus had severed the telemetric links that kept every warship perfectly synchronized. Without the core mind coordinating propulsion systems, massive alien dreadnoughts drifted helplessly into one another. Steel screamed against steel. Heavy cruisers collided in the silent vacuum. Containment fields collapsed. One after another, brilliant explosions of plasma blossomed across the darkness of space. The Vrais commanders possessed overwhelming firepower, but without their network, they couldn't coordinate a single unified attack. Then, the silent arsenal arrived. They were not missiles. They carried no engines, no electronics, no guidance systems, only enormous telephone pole-sized rods of ultradense tungsten carbide traveling at a fraction of the speed of light. Invisible to every thermal sensor, invisible to every radar sweep. They simply fell from space, an unstoppable rain of pure kinetic destruction. The first rod struck the northern hemisphere. The primary orbital tether disappeared in a blinding explosion of kinetic energy. The impact sent a massive shockwave racing across the continent. Windows shattered. Ancient stone foundations cracked. Entire districts trembled. Inside the amphitheater, the true horror of humanity's response finally became clear. Millions who had celebrated only moments earlier now fled in absolute panic. Grand Arbiter Zoker looked toward the sky just in time to see a brilliant streak of white fire tearing through the atmosphere. One tungsten rod, traveling faster than imagination, slammed directly into the command citadel. The towering fortress of obsidian and crystalline armor simply ceased to exist. It vaporized instantly. The explosion hurled Zoker violently across the arena. His ceremonial armor shattered as he crashed against the very dais where Ambassador Jonathan Hayes still lay. Ironically, the fallen human remained almost untouched. Back on Earth, inside the Cheyenne Mountain complex, the suffocating tension had transformed into cold, clinical efficiency. Admiral Evelyn Cross watched the holographic tactical table as the red blips representing the Vrais fleet disappeared one after another, replaced by expanding clouds of drifting debris. Targeting confirmed, General Benjamin Walker reported, his voice carrying no triumph, only grim satisfaction. The Citadel has been neutralized. Their central command structure is gone. The rods have successfully decapitated their military leadership without triggering nuclear fallout. He glanced at the tactical display. The entire operation proceeded exactly as planned. Cross nodded slowly, never taking her eyes off the incoming telemetry. Director Reed. How is Captain Foster's extraction? Director Samuel Reed checked another encrypted communications channel before answering. Team Wraith has successfully reached the undercity extraction point. They're boarding the stealth transport now. They'll break orbit under the cover of the Kinetic bombardment and rendezvous with the Jupiter carrier group. For the first time since the operation had begun, Admiral Cross released a slow, controlled breath. The impossible had become reality. Humanity had defeated the apex predators of the Orion Spur, without sending a single conventional battle fleet into enemy territory. But the mission still wasn't over. The entire galaxy was watching. General Walker, Cross ordered, redirect every surviving Vrais broadcast drone. Walker immediately began typing across his console. They wanted to broadcast an execution to the galaxy. A cold expression settled across Cross's face. Let's make sure everyone witnesses the resurrection. She stepped toward the communications platform. Connect my transmission to the live Galactic hypernet. Walker's hands moved rapidly across the controls. Their firewalls are collapsing. A moment later, he looked up. You now have an open, unencrypted channel to every civilized system in this sector. He nodded respectfully. Admiral, the floor is yours. Cross straightened her uniform. Her expression was calm, resolute, unshakable. She stepped into the projection field. Instantly, her image replaced the chaotic scenes of destruction on trillions of screens across the Orion Spur. Alien citizens from thousands of worlds suddenly found themselves staring at a human woman. She wore no ceremonial armor. She stood inside no magnificent palace. Instead, she stood inside a reinforced concrete command bunker, surrounded by analysts, soldiers, and technicians. Yet somehow, her presence commanded the attention of the entire galaxy. I am Fleet Admiral Evelyn Cross of the Terran Systems Alliance. Her steady voice echoed through alien homes, government chambers, military headquarters, and royal palaces. For generations, the Vrais Empire has ruled this region through fear. They demanded obedience. They demanded tribute. They demanded submission. And today, they demanded our lives. Behind her, footage of the ruined Vrais capital played across enormous holographic displays. They executed Ambassador Jonathan Hayes, believing his death would provoke us into a reckless and emotional attack. They believed humanity would charge blindly into their waiting guns. She paused. They completely underestimated human patience. And they fundamentally misunderstood human warfare. The images behind her shifted once again. Burning cities, destroyed dreadnoughts, the shattered command citadel. The Vrais believed power could be measured by the size of a dreadnought, or the strength of a planetary shield. She slowly shook her head. They were wrong. True power is not measured by brute force. It is measured by intelligence, by patience, and by the unwavering resolve to strike exactly where it matters most. Her expression softened for only a moment. Ambassador Jonathan Hayes knew he was walking into a trap. He volunteered. He willingly carried the weapon that dismantled the Vrais Empire from within. He gave his life knowing he would become the key to ending one of the greatest tyrannies this galaxy has ever known. Far away, Within the burning ruins of Xylos, Grand Arbiter Zoker slowly dragged himself upright. Purple blood dripped from the corners of his mouth. The once mighty amphitheater had become a graveyard. Bodies lay scattered everywhere. Smoke drifted through the shattered arena. The sky itself seemed bruised by fire. Nearby, a broken holographic display continued broadcasting Admiral Cross's speech. Zoker stared at the image. For the first time in his life, his arrogance was gone. Only reality remained. Humanity had not simply defeated him. They had humiliated him before the entire galaxy. They had transformed his own execution broadcast into the greatest military victory in Terran history. They had turned his trusted network into a weapon against itself. And they had destroyed his supposedly invincible capital, using nothing more than silent pieces of metal falling from the stars. To the remaining Vrais military forces scattered across the sector, Admiral Cross said coldly, her voice unwavering, "Your capital is in ruins. Your core mind has been irreversibly corrupted. Your leadership is gone." She paused briefly before continuing. "Any vessel that powers its weapon systems or attempts to jump toward Terran space will be destroyed immediately. Power down your drives and await the arrival of Terran planetary occupation forces." Her gaze shifted slightly, as though addressing every civilization watching the broadcast. "To the other species of the galaxy, humanity does not seek to conquer you. We do not demand tribute. We do not desire endless war. We seek peaceful trade, mutual cooperation, and lasting galactic stability." Then her expression hardened. Her eyes seemed to pierce straight through the camera. "However, let this day stand as a permanent historical record. If you threaten our worlds, if you murder our people, we will not fight on your terms. We will find your weaknesses. We will dismantle your foundations. And we will end you. Do not mistake our desire for peace as an inability to wage absolute, devastating war. The Vrais Empire made that mistake." She gestured toward the burning world behind her. "Look upon their ruined homeworld, and understand the price." The broadcast ended with a wide orbital view of the devastated Vrais capital. Across the galaxy, billions watched in complete silence. Inside the Cheyenne Mountain complex, no one spoke. General Benjamin Walker slowly closed his eyes and released a breath he felt he had been holding for the past 6 months. Director Samuel Reed leaned back in his chair and wiped the thin layer of sweat from his forehead. The impossible gamble had succeeded. Humanity had won. Admiral Cross stepped away from the holographic command table. For the first time since the operation began, the rigid tension in her posture eased. She looked toward the main monitor, where the final image of Ambassador Jonathan Hayes remained frozen. He was still kneeling defiantly before the towering alien executioner. Cross quietly whispered, "You did it, Jonathan. You held the line." Her voice was almost lost beneath the low hum of the underground command center. The galaxy would never be the same. The balance of power throughout the Orion Spur had shifted forever in a matter of hours. Earth was no longer viewed as a young, vulnerable civilization standing on the edge of extinction. Humanity had become the architects of the Vrais Empire's collapse. The species that had slain a giant, without firing a single conventional laser. History would forever remember this day as the dawn of the Terran ascendancy. Meanwhile, Captain Foster's stealth transport punched through the burning upper atmosphere of Vrais Prime. The inertial dampeners struggled against the violent turbulence. Foster looked through the viewport at the crippled alien warships drifting helplessly through space. "We're clear of the gravity well," Rivas announced from the cockpit, his fingers moving rapidly across the controls. "Preparing hyperspace jump." He glanced at the navigation display. 3, 2, 1. The stars stretched into brilliant white lines. The transport vanished into slipspace. Captain Foster leaned back against his crash webbing and finally closed his exhausted eyes. Only now, only after the mission was over, did he allow himself to grieve. Humanity had proven that survival was never about possessing the biggest guns or the strongest armor. It was about intelligence, sacrifice, patience, and an unbreakable spirit. The Vrais had intended to turn humanity's execution into a spectacle. Instead, they had broadcast their own funeral. The silent arsenal had spoken, and the galaxy had listened. From the bustling trade hubs of the Syrah system to the distant mining colonies of the Outer Rim, one truth spread faster than light itself. Humans were small. Humans were fragile. But humans were also infinitely, terrifyingly, dangerous. When cornered, they became something no empire could ever afford to underestimate. The Vrais' reign was over. Human resilience had prevailed. Forever. If you enjoyed this thrilling HFY science fiction story about humanity's brilliant tactical revenge against the Vrais Empire, be sure to smash the like button and share it with your fellow sci-fi fans. Every like helps the channel grow and brings you more epic interstellar adventures. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss another incredible story of human resilience, strategy, and triumph. Leave a comment below and tell us which moment surprised you the most. Until next time, Commanders, stay vigilant. If you enjoyed this thrilling HFY science fiction,